Good morning and welcome to this, our first webinar of 2024, brought to you by Construction Management and BIM Plus. This session is entitled From Construction to Operations, Glider's Information Management Challenge on 40 Leadenhall Street, in association with Ideagen Mail Manager. Our programme today will have a case study from Glider detailing the data challenge it faced on Mace's 40 Leadenhall Street mixed-use project, where Glider was asset information management and handover consultant. As we'll find out, the quantity of information on Leadenhall was vast. Then Ideagen Mail Manager will focus on an often neglected part of information management, email management. There will be a Q&A session after the speakers have concluded their presentations. Let me introduce our speakers this morning. Lucas Cusack, Strategic Lead Asset Management at Glider, and George Emeny, Senior Client Manager at Ideagen Mail Manager. I'm Justin Stanton, Editor of BIM Plus. I'm your chair this morning. As ever, for those of you who are regulars, you probably know the housekeeping, but if you're new to this, I better run through it. Please use the Q&A function, not the chat function. Please use the Q&A function to ask questions of the speakers. The panel will address those questions in the Q&A session at the end. You can pose the questions as yourself or anonymously. This webinar is being recorded and will be available to watch on demand via the original registration link later today. There is 1 hour's CPD credit for those who complete this webinar live. CPD credits will be issued, certificates rather, will be issued a couple of hours after the webinar has finished. That's enough of that. Let's crack on. Lucas, over to you. I'll stop sharing my screen. If you can share yours and turn on your mic and camera.
Thank you, Justin. And thank you to everyone who's watching today, whether you're with us live or watching the recording. Let's jump straight in. And since we're going to talk a bit about Glider today, I just wanted to provide a brief intro. The Glider is a full asset lifecycle information management solution. I say solution in that we provide a managed service that's coupled with our platform, Glider BIM, and that operates around these points in the graphic to your right in the information management lifecycle. We define, deliver, verify, manage, and optimize data, making it readily available to our customers to better manage their real estate. I'm Lucas Cusack. I'm Glider's strategic lead for asset management. I've been delivering data on large real estate projects for most of my career and have spent the last 10 years creating digital twins in various forms and guises for asset owners using the wealth of data that we produce during the design and construction phases. And now an intro for the start of the show, 40 Leadenhall, with a few stats, just for those of you who aren't too familiar with the project. 40 Leadenhall is a 900,000 square foot, about 84,000 square metre commercial building in the City of London. As far as London skyscraper nicknames go, this one's been affectionately known as the Gotham building, among some others. It's very high-end office space with retail, restaurants, and many desirable amenities available to the public and their tenants. It's massive. 40 Leadenhall takes up 2 London addresses spanning the block between Leadenhall and Fenchurch Street, each with different building volumes facing the street. So there's the 34-storey volume and a 14-storey volume. The floor plates on the lower floors are just under 40,000 square foot each, and that's quite huge. If you can see my cursor here, there we are. This one over here, that's 22 Bishopsgate. And any of you who've been in the city know that that is an enormous building. This 40 Leadenhall's got an even bigger footprint. It was designed by Make Architects and currently under construction by Mace, due for completion this year, and it was developed by Nuveen for the owner, Emeny Real Estate. So it's already got some very high-profile tenants, including world's largest law firm by revenue, Kirkland & Ellis, insurance firm Chubb, and American fintech Acrisure. They're all in there fitting out right now. Being high-end and high-profile, the expectations on service and amenity and convenience are very high. So Arcadis was brought in as a smart buildings consultant to deliver a smart building strategy that will connect various technologies, including our own glider BIM platform. JLL, James Lang LaSalle, has taken over the property management role now, and they will use Glider to ensure that the onboarding of their operational tech is aligned with all the asset information delivered from construction. So we're going to get right into that later. First, I just want to take you back to 2016, because I recall working on this project in 2016. I was a digital engineer at Laing O'Rourke, and we were bidding on Vanquish, as it was called then. Much to my disappointment, we didn't win. But at the time, in 2016, who had heard of a digital twin, right? AI was something from the Terminator, a large language model that just wasn't even a term that I'd heard of back then. Really, we were just getting to grips with the BIM mandate coming into force, and everyone was still arguing about the ambiguities of PAS 1192 Part 2. Coincidentally, this was the year Glider was formed, just one day before the BIM mandate launched in April. So let's fast forward to 2019, when the project finally got some traction. There were some changes in ownership, so any client data requirements at this stage were certainly very difficult to define. The building owner appointed a BIM consultant who was tasked with creating information requirements for a building that wouldn't be occupied until 5 years later. So that sounds impossible, but this is what BIM and information management consultants who create these sort of requirements are up against on any large project. It sounds crazy, but that's the norm. So how do you know what data you'll need 5 years from now? So we make provisions. You would look at what could be too much data, what would be too little data, and then what is the right amount of data. And this is very important, but we can't predict the future. We have an idea of what might be useful, but we don't want to overburden the supply chain to deliver over and above what is useful, as that would be very disruptive and in turn quite expensive. And we don't want to underdeliver, because that will create a lot of work for the operator to resurvey the building, which does happen quite a lot. Pardon me. So what is too much data? What does that look like? Probably this much. So when you look at library objects in Revit or the like that you download from the manufacturer, they have loads of data. Parts of it could be useful to someone at some point, but all of it is useful to no one really. So the biggest risk that you could do is download an object that looks like the final component that you want to just use for coordination and design purposes, but the data in it's irrelevant. If that makes its way to an operational model, there's a big risk that there's going to be erroneous data in there being used. Another thing you might do is specify COBie without actually looking at what fields you really need. The example to the right is actually a glider example, and this is a good example because you can see there's lots of grey NAs in there, because we worked with the owner or the facilities manager to rule out what they didn't need, what would be useful as structured data. And we look at what could be too little data. So this could be caused by a number of reasons. One could be the absence of any information requirements at all. So there's nothing there. Could also be the good intention of getting useful data, but failing. So i.e. you don't get what you asked for. Or it could be that you've not asked for the right data and you end up getting a different result than what you'd originally planned for. So that's with too little data. So what's just right? This is the $1 million question, quite literally, because if you get it wrong, that's how much it could cost you. So the fact is that all data that is needed will be handed over in some form. Could be a document, could be a paper manual, a book, anything. In the world of BIM and information management, what we try to do is make the format of that consistent, reusable, repeatable, searchable, etc. The least you can do is to enforce a requirement that allows you to connect the key parts of your asset, as I've sort of illustrated here in this example. So we've got models, structured data, documents, and I've added time series data to the right, which is what's being generated in operation. If you were to specify just one thing, like this, or try to get just one thing right, that would be the ID. So an asset ID, it's unique and it should tell you something. In this example, it's a fan coil unit on level 17. The ID tells me this, but it also tells me the building, just in case I'm analyzing data from across multiple buildings. It has the level, the system it's part of, which might even tie it back to a specific air handling unit or a system, and it's unique. Generally, for operation, you need to know what something is, where it is, and this ID. Other things like who made it, who installed it, when its warranty expires, they're useful. But if you're limited in what you can realistically pull from your supply chain, just enforce the unique ID. If you think that's too simple or overly simple, then I can tell you I've never actually seen it done 100% correct in my career. Room numbers change, design asset naming conventions get lost in translation between contractor design, manufacturer, and commissioning. And when they start producing time series data, do you think that that's all still following naming convention? Not likely. So if there's anyone out there actually watching who disagrees with me as a BIM manager and you've briefed a BMS installer rather of the information requirements, or you're a BMS vendor and you've actually been briefed on a BIM strategy, message me after the webinar because I'd like to take you out for a pint. So we're ready to build 40 Leadenhall. We've got the information requirements. I've got the exchange requirements. The contractor is appointed. That is Mace. They've been appointed to deliver the project. So naturally, they've inherited the responsibility of supplying the handover data. That includes asset data, 3D models, documents. Mace have appointed Glider to deliver the handover requirements using our managed service to corral the trades and validate the information that they were supplying against the requirements. We've got a project start date. Then this happened. So the day before Mace were to start on site, the country went into lockdown. All of a sudden, the challenge of managing the delivery of information requirements was amplified by a workforce that had to adapt to new ways of working. In a changing world with new challenges in managing real estate now, so too there became new information requirements, which were very hard to adapt to on the fly. It's a change of the goalpost, new deliverables. All of a sudden, so to speak, we're flying the plane whilst upgrading it to a newer model in midair. So let's look at what we're working with and how we would manage that. So there's 60 plus trade contractors on site, circa 1,900 models, and that's including like the 3 formats that they're being supplied in. So far, we've handed over just under 31,500 documents. There's 14 sectional handovers, so not just like one sort of PC, here's the keys. It's like that happens 14 times. There's over 1,000 maintainable assets, and that's not a huge number compared to some of the other ones I'm throwing up at you, but this is like big kit, like big maintainable bits of plant and equipment that have many data points each. So that is quite a lot. And amongst those, there's immeasurable attributes. And I say immeasurable because in 1,900 models, I couldn't find anyone willing to do a quantity takeoff of everything in there because that would have taken longer than it took me to prepare this presentation. So you just have to take my word for it. It's a lot. But really, there's only 4 attributes per asset and per other things that we care about. I'll say 1,000 maintainable assets. There's many other model elements that do contain valuable information, but we're not going to essentially put that into other systems in operation. It's these 4 ones that we really care about. So the Glider BIM, our platform, the process overview. So uploading and verifying data within Glider can be broken into these steps. There's the configuration process. So after we configure, the data is going to constantly go through what we call an ETL process. So with each submission of data from the supply chain, could be IFC, it could be KV, it's extracted from those sources, processed and organized, i.e. transformed and then moved into or loaded into a data repository. So the configuration process involves a plan of work. So we have asset categories. This allows us Glider to tell the data that we want and how it should appear in the register. For example, in Kobe, you might have a sheet that's broken into category and then each has a row as a deliverable. This is how we set up verification rules. There's pick lists. These can be manual pick lists or dynamic. So manual is when you want to pick from data that will never change, like uniclass, because that's coming from a specific library of data, or dynamic pick lists, where the data is dependent on other data. So if you upload space data from the architect, and that's used to verify component space data from an MEP trade. So it's all sort of related. Then we have model disciplines. This is where data is imported against. This allows us to separate the data. So if you want to, for example, break a model down by trade, work package, zone, or floor, etc., we then have roles. This allows us to designate roles and groups to direct users to correct the information if it's wrong. I'll get into that. And then the templates is where the verification aspect of Glider starts to take shape. And this is where we combine asset categories, pick lists, model disciplines, and roles into multiple templates and set rules. So the ETL process, to begin, once the workplace has been set up, then you're ready to import the data. And this is in the form of an IFC or a COBie workbook, or it could be as simple as a list of names in Excel. So we're trying to sort of adapt to like the various capabilities of the supply chain and what they can deliver. And then it can be configured to any data ontology as well. So we're working with COBie here, not necessarily having to work with COBie on other projects, the way we configure the platform. So Glider then performs checks before the data is uploaded, just to ensure the data is unique and there's no duplicates. Once the data is imported, then it will be directed to a change set page. And here you assign that data to different templates, like we were talking about before. So your contact data, as an example, would go under the contact template. Your type data would go under the type template. And these rules are set up to verify this particular data, which would be different to your type data. Once processed, the change set can be accepted. Then the verification process begins. So now the change set's been processed and data is run against the template. The rules are applied via the template. And once that's complete, you'll see an overview of the compliance based on the selected phase. So these could be handover phases. I'm just using more generic examples here for you to not show project information, but this is stage 5. It's showing me compliance against these components within the model that have come in, and you can sort of break it down and see why that's incomplete. You can see there's an invalid value there. And this is all happening from our templates because we've set that space to be measured against a list, and it's checked it and it's come back and said, well, that doesn't exist, or it's incorrect, so it's an invalid value. So what we do there, we push out a request for information to the user who's given us that or is assigned to provide that information. And then they can update it in Glider. So as an example, in stage 6, the data might not be in the model. It might not be in the workbook, or it could be completed by a third party. And this is the beauty of the asset ID. So not everything has to come in to the information model via a 3D model. It can be entered by someone at the other end of a computer using paper information, because that's how they work. And once they update that, they put the information in, we verify it to ensure compliance against these rules that were set, and then it can make its way back into the list of the data. So, and that's without the need to re-upload the original IFC. So the register then is a repository of all the deliverables. They all come in. It's kind of like your federated space for your data. It allows you to combine separate workbooks into a single exportable workbook. I say workbook, could be like a COBie workbook. And this is where the dynamic pick lists that I was talking about before, so something will sort of go into the master workbook and look for data that need to verify against other rules. And then once the RFIs, these requests for information are completed, and you want to put that data back into the model, you can. So you can actually put data that's come in via Excel workbooks and user input back into the IC, and you can export the IC. The thing holding all that together, as I keep banging on, is the asset ID. And then there's reporting. So we've got some built-in reporting, but what we also like to do, we recognize there's specific project and organizational reporting. Everyone's unique in their organization, so we adapt to that. We create reports based on what they need. So the data can be exported from Glider to Power BI, Tableau, whatever you want. And then the other type of information that I've not talked about is the document information in the form of record, as-built drawings, O&Ms, etc. So there's over 30,000, as I mentioned. These are all verified using similar templates and rules in our document management module. And the good thing here is that we can set up common metadata attributes so the documents have a dynamic link to the assets in the asset register in the 3D models. They're all tied together. There's another example, lots of green, which is a nice sign. So let's look at what happens at handover. So how a project information model becomes an asset information model. And the PIM has different uses to the AIM, as you see listed there on each side. In operation, you don't have access and you don't use information in work packages. So in operation, that is, in sections as you do in construction. So right now, the PIM is optimized for construction. And what we'll do is we'll configure a new workspace just for the owner, or the landlord, to migrate everything from the contractor's workspace in a format and structure that helps them run the building. So it won't look exactly like it does for the contractor. It'll look a bit different because it's optimized for them. And we'll optimize by creating connections between some of the elements, which is something that you don't really need in construction. And we'll look at also connecting GlodaBIM to other platforms using our built-in no-code connection tool, and that does everything via URLs. And what does an in-use AIM look like? So it'll be used as a resource for everything and more that's listed there on the left, but also very key as an enabler to other technology on the right. So I mentioned before, we had Arcadis doing the smart building strategy. What we've done is kept ourselves open to any possibilities of new technology coming on and being able to connect the data from construction to that new technology. So CAFM, fault detection diagnostics, tenant fit out as well, which is more of a process than a technology because the tenants are coming in, and space management, including tenant apps or engagement apps, will all be using the unique ID that I keep bringing up to keep information and data aligned and maintainable. And we also create meaningful connections between the platforms to enable a better user experience and automate data sharing as well. Pardon me. So the next step, well, that's the next step. There's no way in 2016 or 2019 that I could have known that this is how the building would want to use an asset information model. But what I did know was how to keep it all together so that the recipient of the data has maximum options and opportunities to exploit it. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for watching. Feel free to learn more at our website, which is listed there, and reach out to me direct if you want. My details are there, and we'll get back to you later with some Q&A. But for now, I'll pass you on to Justin.
Lucas, thank you very much. That was great. So, as you say, it's George up next. So, George, if you're ready to turn your mic and camera on and share your screen, we'll hand over to you.
Fantastic. Awesome. Thanks, Justin. Let me just get my notes up. Also, thanks, Lucas, that presentation. That's really insightful. There's a couple of our clients that you mentioned there, so it's always interesting to see how they're managing those different data points on projects. So, as mentioned earlier, my name's George. I work for Mail Manager, and predominantly we work alongside businesses globally, but mainly within the AEC. So, you'll probably hear me refer to that a lot today. So, it's the architecture, engineering, and construction firms. And really what we're trying to do is help unify their project information. So just to get started, really, the technology landscape, I'm sure I don't want to bore you all with stats today, but there'll be a fair few. But the technology landscape globally is changing at a really increasing speed. This is no difference within the AEC space, so architecture, engineering, construction. And as I'm sure you notice in your own work, technology has continued to rapidly evolve the AEC and become safer, cheaper, and also quicker as well. Today, there are numerous examples, I'm sure you all know, of how new technology is revolutionizing the AEC sector. For example, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, and also BIM, of course. It's not, it's no surprise that with everything in the world going on right now, with teams working remotely, that it's becoming even more and more difficult to access those critical bits of project information. I'm sure, and I've said this, but AEC professionals like yourselves rely on strong, consistent communication to get the job done. These days, I mean, sorry, the days are gone really where you can turn around to your colleague next to you and ask for a particular email, a particular bit of specification on a project. Sadly, those days are gone. What this means for a lot of people is if they don't have access to the information when they need it, then you are let out the communication loop. And as I'm sure you can imagine, this is a huge problem. With over 350 billion emails sent and received last year every day, email is the most used communication and collaboration tool across the world. But it's one of the things that most people manage differently, which does create a huge risk for the future of accessing those bits of communication. One of these risks comes from the dreaded project rework. A recent study found that 80% of professionals spend half their time on reworks. There's a lot of time that has been wasted on those particular parts of the job. Rework doesn't obviously just waste your time and money, but it can cause huge communications breakdown within your team and your senior executive teams, and those obviously key stakeholders. So here at Ideagen Mail Manager, every year we run an annual survey called the State of the AEC Project Management Research Report, which aims to really discover project management and collaboration challenges facing businesses globally in the AEC industries. The report aims to explore how firms manage project information and also where they store it and how they go about retrieving data when facing legal disputes. In addition to this, it also provides a really valuable insight to how the industry has been affected by current global economy changes like the cost of living crisis, supply chain issues, and the latest changes to building regulations. So as you can see on the screen here, this year we surveyed around 550 AEC leaders from businesses across the globe, with a vast majority of response coming from here in the UK, but also the US and Canada as well. So let's get stuck into the findings and tell you some really interesting stats today. So firstly, the majority of firms we spoke to cannot easily access their project information. So we found that only 10% of respondents were not concerned about their accessibility on their project information. So most of this, as you can see, is a big challenge. Secondly, over a quarter of firms are at risk when staff do leave the business. So our research has found that more firms are aware of the importance of filing emails as a part of the offboarding process when people leave the business than last year. So that's sort of improving the importance there. In 2022, less than half of respondents indicated that employees were required to file all project-related emails into a central location. So that number has risen actually from 58% risen to 58% this year. So it's great to see that it's becoming more and more prevalent there. But sadly, unfortunately, 28% of companies we spoke to still do not require emails to be filed. And so typically this information is just usually lost. Third, as you can see on the list here, is disputes are continuing to rise year on year. In our 2021 research report, 63% of respondents experienced some form of legal disputes in that year. This number actually this year has risen to 91%, so a really significant increase there. Project scope changes and payments continue to be the leading cause of these disputes. Considering the majority of project scope information resides in email and firms can't easily access this, it's hardly surprising that they are continuing to dig themselves into trouble. And then finally, just last on the screen there is email is still the most used communication and collaboration tool for the industry. For the purpose of this session today, we'll be mainly focusing on email and this influence it has on the disputes angle. But as I'm sure, email is something we deal with on a regular basis, so we'll be hopefully interested in this. So according to the World Bank, we are currently in the second year of slowly economic growth. Sorry to put a down on things. And in the AEC, we are seeing trends where costs are beginning to rise. Margins are tighter than ever, and large staff cutbacks are sadly on the cards. Even larger global firms have reported a huge drop-off in profits as their staff costs are increasing. And unfortunately, more firms are going into administration than ever, really. With so much uncertainty and so many people leaving businesses, there is a strong need for organizations to really think about their information management and how they can have a good continuity there when people do leave. So how can you be sure that you have access to all the documents and correspondence if a member of staff is to leave the business? So considering 28% of the businesses that we spoke to do not have an email filing as part of their offboarding process, and 81% of firms use email as a majority communication tool for project correspondence, thousands of firms are at risk of losing project information. And even more concerning is that in the finding that we did, 55% of those surveyed indicated they did not have any email management systems in place. As I'm sure everyone on the webinar today has heard the phrase emails are dead, or I won't be using emails in 10 years' time, but definitely something we found from our research report that these claims can be proven otherwise, if you like. Just moving on, in 2023, 88% of the survey respondents indicated that overall volume of emails has actually increased as well. So that probably backs up that claim there in the last 12 months. This is usually a massively stark increase on the year before. On top of this, almost 2/3 of the AEC industries regularly need to retrieve emails from past projects, with only 2% never having the need. So a really low percentage there. And over the last 3 years, where we've actually been doing this research report, these numbers have remained relatively consistent. Many can relate to not always needing to refer to previous emails. However, only 1 or 2% never need to find older emails, so a really small percentage there. And for many firms, emails are keeping them well organized For many firms, emails and keeping them well organized and accessible is not a consideration until usually when things go wrong and there is that, God forbid, a dispute on a project. And when we can see emails hold vital information that could mean the difference in winning and losing dispute, it's really surprising that people don't take better care of their information on projects. Unfortunately, we are seeing that project costs are continuing to spiral, which has led to an increase in disputes in the AEC. Our research report found that only 9% of people surveyed had not experienced a dispute in the last 12 months, and 63% of organizations reporting experience a dispute in the business in 2021. This number rose to 78% in 2022, and then 91%, as I mentioned, in 2023. And just going back as well, that the top 2 causes of these disputes are typically regarding project scope changes and chasing payments. And unfortunately for the industry, issues relating to project scope are continuing to gain momentum. Why is this? It's usually because, from at least our experience with the report, a majority of the information regarding scope changes is stored in emails and other formal documents. To break this down even further than that, 12% of project scope changes do not reside in any digital space at all. Shockingly, 11% of respondents highlighted that the only place they kept the information is in the project manager's head. So I'm sure we all know someone who doesn't even have any information stored, then they have it all stored in their head, and you've got to go and give them a call to find this information. With findings like these, it's hardly surprising that 90% of project correspondence are found in email and not being readily accessible. So we're constantly seeing failings to make emails visible and accessible to project teams, and it can cause issues to result in a legal dispute. According to Arcadis' 2022 Global Construction Disputes Report, the global average value of disputes was $52.6 million, with an average length of 15.4 months, so almost a year and a half there. And firms cannot afford to let information like correspondence slip through the cracks. We've seen this sort of term being phrased recently called leaky bucket of email, negatively affecting the AEC firms globally recently. Firms must be aware, really, of their corporate history and being able to prove anything that has happened on projects recently, especially when stakes are so high. And given the nature of the industry that you guys all operate in, the people we speak to operate in, firms need to guarantee information visibility and accessibility to ensure they are making the right decisions. And in the best case, poor information management costs firms money, but in the worst, it makes people unsafe, really, as we've seen on past projects here in the UK. Given the size of the global disputes environment at the moment and the cost of mismanaging emails, it is immense. And this usually includes information being locked in individuals' inboxes, staff wasting time looking for information that they need to do their job, and also staff, obviously, as we mentioned earlier, leaving the businesses or going on holiday, but a range of important information is trapped in their inbox. With proper email management process in place, businesses just can ensure that all project information and correspondence is captured and accessible by the entire project teams. This will reduce the risk of rework and potentially stop project disputes in their track. Plus, you'll have the information in your hands down the line should this liability dispute arise. So that has just been a quick overview of the research report we've done over the last year. We'll send this across to all of you in the next couple of days so you can have that in more detail. But what does this mean for information management? And so how can it, I guess, help you avoid disputes going forward? Luckily for us, technology advancements are continually to prove how we work. And as I touched on earlier, AEC firms are increasingly using tech to boost efficiencies. And BIM advancements mean that teams and members are on the same page. The use of BIM has seen several benefits in the global AEC industry, including reducing waste, improved collaboration, enhanced productivity, time saving, and overall increased technology adoption across the board. It's improving safety across the industry and provides deep insights into existing buildings as well. So while all this new tech and standards like ISO 19650 are making our lives easier and really boosting the industry, we have access to a massive amount of data, both inside and outside our organizations, that makes information management difficult. The sensitive and often confidential information is typically stored within documents or correspondence, and it's often quite inaccessible, stored in disparate local applications by various departments or even offices. Information usually is the lifeblood of all project work, as Lucas highlighted on, but it's only when it's well organized, accessible, secure, and updated that it becomes helpful. And this is no easy task. So what really is the solution? So from what I speak to people in the AEC on a regular basis, and what they always tell me is you need a single place where you can store all of your project and client information in one place so that you can have a complete picture of what has been said on any given project. We've all heard of it. It's that single source of truth, or maybe even known as the golden thread here in the UK. It's a concept based around the bringing of all the information together, ensuring everyone in an organization is really on the same page and has access to everything when they need it to make those critical business decisions. A single source of truth really provides a better working methods and encourages more transparent communication. So this is helping organizations drive faster change without compromising quality, really, that all-important quality which we strive for to keep our clients on board. And it also ensures that all project and client teams have access to the correct information they need and also when they need it. So managing project information in one place is critical to avoiding those disputes. And when done right, it allows teams to use their time, resources, and knowledges to make the right decisions at the right time. So two of the easiest ways to create a single source of truth are by removing manual processes, because at the end of the day, if there is a manual process, it's taking people time they're not going to input into the single source of truth. And the second one being increasing information visibility across the board. So having some really good platform that allows you to search those information. One thing to keep in mind is that your single source of truth is only really as good as the information you put into it. So it's only the truth if it's fully complete. And if it's not fully complete, it's not the truth. What we've seen in our research report is that while firms are stringent about how their documents and contracts are managed, email is one of the things that is often overlooked, and because everyone manages it differently. Without the right tools and automation in place, project teams are left to their own devices, and some people move emails into their inbox subfolders. Some save important information to individual desktops, and others simply delete information because they don't see it needed any longer. In all of these scenarios, that is information. What we're seeing is information is trapped in silos and is regularly just inaccessible to the wider project team. I'm sure we've all worked on those jobs before where you can't find an email and someone's on holiday or someone's even left the business, and it can take even longer to go and find it. So losing access to essential emails or not including in your overall information management strategy can prove detrimental, usually to firms. When emails are managed correctly, so on the flip side of things, everyone in an organization has access to the information when they need it and if they need it to make the right decisions at the right time. It usually provides a much better way of working and encourages more transparent communication and ensures that all of the team members have access to a single source of truth. I always like to describe it as, you ensure that everyone's singing off the same hymn sheet on a project. So it's time to avoid these common email headaches of this wasn't what we agreed, or when did you tell us this, or can you forward me that email, or I need X, Y, and Z before our meeting. Those headaches, it's time to get rid of those. Some of the benefits of centralized information really include a couple of ones you can see on the screen. I won't go into detail on all these, but just establishing version control, increasing transparency and traceability, and also complying with regulatory and legal requirements. And these requirements are put in place to provide best working standards. And that's where we, here at Ideagen Mail Manager, that's where we come in. So why am I talking to you today? As I'm sure everyone in this call has heard or has probably worked with Arup in the past, we were designed and built by a firm called Arup Engineering, who are globally based here in London and Fitzrovia, but they designed Mail Manager themselves. The reason why they did that is really simply because of the problems you can see on the screen here. So they had a lot of emails flying around their inboxes, as I'm sure everyone on the call today has. They had no consistent way of getting that information consistently put into project folders. They asked people to manually drag and drop them into the single source of truth, but really, listen, as I mentioned, manual processes often are overlooked. And often, even if they do follow that process, you're wasting time as well as energy filing emails. So what they did is they went back in house and they wanted to find something they could just pluck off the shelf and get plugged in. They wanted a lightweight system that was easy to implement, nice and scalable. Funny enough, they couldn't find anything that was going to do that, so went the other way and then developed Mail Manager themselves, which is probably one of the best things I personally love about it. Is it's designed by a project team for other project teams, so we really know who we're helping and how to help them, really. What I've done is I've just put a couple of our customers on the screen here and just a couple of the benefits that they've had. So someone like Genza, we've done a couple of studies with them, and they found to be saving about 5 hours per week per person on administrative tasks like email filing and searchability. And then Ramble, they just had a really good benefit of just providing team visibility across the board. And then WSP as well. So they're one of our biggest clients across North America and across the world as well. So these are the issues that we're really trying to solve here. So emails being lost is a really big risk there. I'm sure we've all have IT that can dig up an email at some stage, but it might take a lot of time, and they may actually never be able to find that email. And if you can't find an email in a legal dispute, you can't be able to prove your innocence. Wasting time, alongside legal disputes is just wasting 10-15 minutes here because someone's at the office. You can't turn around to them saying, can you forward me that email? Or likewise, I think we've all been in those instances where we've had to search for a couple of hours for an email and maybe we haven't even found it. That is lost project work. If you're working on billable hours, that's wasting your billable hours on admin tasks you fundamentally can't charge out to somebody. Lack of control. Far too often, really, we're hearing process being put in place to solve these or comply to the Building Safety Act with the golden thread, but there's a lack of control there because people just aren't following that process. And then what that leads to is the last one there. It is a disconnect. Information's locked in people's inboxes, locked in silos, and there is no single source of truth, and therefore you're not getting a best picture of what's been said on the projects. So what are we going to do we're going to give you really great search tool, means you can retrieve those information really quickly. We're going to mean you can find any email without wasting any time, increase productivity so you can file emails really quickly, and also ensure you're compliant to whatever regulations you're after, but also ensuring you've got a single source of truth. And then what we're going to do is provide a one place for the email management. So you've got one place to find out what's been said on project, why it's been said and the like. Perfect. So now I'll get on to the exciting bit is of showing you all exactly how Mail Manager works. So I will just start by opening up my Outlook here. So at first glance, you can see it won't look too dissimilar to yours. Mail Manager just adds these three sort of simple buttons at the top of your taskbar. So nice, lightweight, easy to implement system, and really it's a quick fix to a big problem. And that's what we like to describe it as. What we're going to do, and what I'll show you today, guys, is how we file emails out of an inbox to a single source of truth, to your server, to your SharePoint, to your project, document management system. That's exactly what we're going to do. And then what we have is a search tool here to provide everyone a really good platform to not only retrieve it, but do it really quickly and efficiently as well. So how do emails get filed away? I take an email here from Zach. This might be an email you guys all receive on a project. What's the update on the project? So I'm going to say the client wants to make changes to the windows. So quite an important directional email there that usually gets locked in someone's inbox. They won't be able to find it later down the line. And if there is a dispute saying we never approved that change in Windows, you wouldn't be able to go back and find it. What we do with Mail Manager, someone clicks send, greeted straight away here with this nice, neat and tidy prompt that tells you, but also more importantly, everyone to file away the email. So it gets everyone driving consistently, saving the emails across the projects, but also it tells someone exactly where to file to. And that's done a number of things. Can look for the keywords, but also where you like to file emails to. So click send and file, files away that email, sent and received emails get filed away to the project folder. And then what it does is it files an email to your subfolder on the left-hand side for you to access later on down the line. So that's filing emails, really quick, fits in with your workflow, but it is that small change you can make to ensure that you can save potentially thousands on billable hours being wasted, but also disputes later down the line. Second half of the system really nicely is this search tool here. So what that is a window that allows you to search for all project information, all project emails within one click. I've just opened that up in my other window. Give me 1 second. So what that opens up here is this window here that allows you to search for, let's see if I can get rid of this. Allows you to search for all project information within 2 or 3 clicks. So I've got access to all these different search criteria on the left-hand side here, but also the top here. So I've got access to just over 500,000 emails here. Most of these emails I've never been involved in, thankfully, but you can use this search tool to find out what's been said on a project. So let's say there is a dispute surrounding invoices or payments, which is what we're seeing most disputes are surrounding. What you can do, I'm sorry if you can't quite see that box there, but this is blocking it. But what this does here, this box here allows you to type in a keyword, and I'm going to type in invoice. That allows you to search for any keyword on a project. So I'm going to bring up a keyword there, and it's not just going to search the subject, but also body as well. So allows you to pull out those emails quickly. Go into a project folder here. So that might be 40 Leadenhall Street, as Lucas mentioned. Go into that project folder there, but also attachments can search for those as well. And finally, my favorite filter here is the ability to type in someone's name. So what that's done there is brought it down from 500,000 emails to 1. So this is a good example of someone who's left the business. You couldn't find their email. You'd usually have to go to IT and take a long time to do it. But what you've got here is a really quick search to find the whole chain of communication, what's been said, why it's been said, and then actually end the day, press that button there and actually open it up from the SharePoint, from your project document management system, and be able to apply to it or do whatever you need to do to the email there as well. So hopefully what you're all seeing here is a really organized email management platform that's going to ensure that you're creating that single source of truth, creating that golden thread accessibility, but also not wasting any time in the process and hopefully reducing the cost of disputes later down the line as well. I think that is it from me. All I've got to say, yeah, thanks for catching up with me today, guys. If there's any other questions, I can get some of those answers on the call today. But we're more than happy to do sort of more in-depth demonstrations, or we run on pilots and trials of the system as well. But I'll hand over to Justin now to get the questions answered.
George, thank you very much. Okay, let's get into the Q&A. So let's just take them from the top. Lucas, if you're back with us as well, great, thank you. The first question says, how did you find it working with the FM team? Do you know if they are actually going to use the data you've given them?
It's a good question. It's going to be different on all projects. You will struggle to get access to an FM team early days because they simply don't exist, or they're just not involved. They've not been appointed yet. I do know they're going to use the data because we kept it minimal. And from experience working with FMs who've received data, often their comments are like, this is so much, it's more than we can even get into our platform. So from a bit of experience, that's kind of how I know that they will use it. So
yeah. And the next one is, any tips for getting suppliers engaged with data better? It feels like pushing water uphill sometimes.
Yep. So we've all experienced that. I think at the end of a project, things get busy and hectic, and you're not as big a priority as getting the actual physical asset built. Our industry is all built around commercial vehicles and contracts. So you have to sort of play the game, get a good contract in place, get your information requirements into the contract with some sort of incentive or penalty there for not supplying it, so that you can really get it out of them when you need it. So.
Okay. And the next one, do you think your data strategy can be as effective on another project where you don't have the unexpected benefit of a COVID delay?
Yeah, I mean that strategy for me is one that I've worked and stood by for 10 years. Like getting the key components to bring things together. That's the most flexible way to work with a supply chain that either can supply a lot, or would struggle to supply even just an ID. So I think that is a good method.
Okay. And Enrico Calzavara asks, it says great presentation. How do you ensure, and at what step, that the asset IDs are unique?
Hi Enrico, thanks for it. So that's a good point, because what you need to look at is when that information becomes available, and also like what's the effort going to be if you introduce a naming convention early on and maintain it. So for an example, you don't know if your FM is going to care too much about having all the lights in the building with a unique asset ID. They might not. So if you make the decision to say, yeah, they do need it, you're going to have to monitor that from design to construction to installation, and it could be quite disruptive. Or you could just wait till the end, and if they do say, yeah, I want it, take the manufacturer's installation, or the installer's like drawings, and just backfill the model. That might actually be easier than maintaining it all the way through. So it's a difficult question, mate, but I know you well enough to think I know you understand what I'm saying. So cheers.
Okay, all right. We'll throw some questions George's way. Someone asks, does Mail Manager read documents attached to an email? Oh, you're on mute, George. You're on mute. Sorry.
There we go. Sorry, I was
there you go.
Water. Sorry. Good question. So, does it read the documents attached to an email? So, I presume that's probably around sort of searching documents. We can't search the documents themselves because they're a document inside an email document. And what we can do is on the search tool is it gives you the ability to search the document name that's on the email, which is really handy. In terms of the document itself, let's say on the flip side of the question, if you're wondering if it reads the email for suggestions and prompting, it does take consideration the keywords written on the email, takes into consideration and provides a better suggestion there for you. But probably need a bit more clarity on that question.
Yeah, okay. And what happens with sensitive emails?
Yeah, good question. It's always when people show people that search tool, they always think, oh, God, people are going to find my personal emails or my HR emails. So with sensitive emails, whatever restrictions you've got in place where we're storing them, it's going to carry those over. So think about your file server. Let's use that as an example. If there's a HR drive on there that's restricted for just those in HR, it's going to be the same on the search tool. So as much as I'd love to work out how much my colleagues are paid and things, I won't ever be able to because it's restricted there and therefore restricted on the search.
Excellent, excellent. Okay. And what happens with duplicate emails where, long email chain where there's, half a dozen or more people involved?
Yeah, good question. So, I mean, it's one of those things. If you're striving for a golden thread of information, you want it to be clear and concise. You don't want multiple duplicates of those emails. So that's why with Mail Manager, what we do is we deduplicate those emails. So there's no duplicates whatsoever. I won't go into the boring explanation of how that works, but I can just say it does work. And we don't duplicate any email. So if 5 people file away the same copy, it's only going to file away one physical copy.
Okay. What's the induction/training involved when implementing Mail Manager? Some email users are not as organized as others. That's
Yeah.
I'm not talking about myself there in no way.
Luckily, we're very well experienced inside the AEC space, and shall we say, I know we're very used to people on projects who aren't very technical, tech savvy, and that's part of the beauty of Mail Manager. Really, is it's a very light touch tool. It's not going to reinvent the wheel of emails. You'll still be using Outlook, which is what most people do. But we're just going to make a couple of subtle changes, and we can make even smaller ones that don't affect you anymore. So it stays in your inbox and just puts an orange tag on it. But likewise, all of our clients get a training session whenever they're on board with us, so they ensure that they're using it properly. We want our customers to come back to us year on year, and that's part of the way we do it. It's just doing really good training sessions and ensure they're using the system.
Sure. Jump back to Lucas. Question for you. In your experience, are clients or asset owners commissioning teams and their operational teams understanding each other's data needs better than a few years ago? We've always assumed, or we've always experienced a classic disconnect between the two, I guess.
Yeah. I would say yes, it has improved, but we still have a long way to go. I think there's certain examples where it's working really well, but the execution generally, which is quite hard in the pace of construction and all the challenges that we have, it's still proving difficult. So there's a lot of work to be done still.
Yeah,
we've got some good examples so far of it working.
Okay, all right. Back to George. Does Mail Manager work alongside Outlook?
Correct. Yeah. So I mean, that's the sole platform we work alongside at the moment. Sadly, we don't work with Gmail or any other email providers. It's Outlook only. So sorry for the Gmail users, but yeah, it's Outlook only at the moment.
Someone else says we use Teams for project comms. How does Mail Manager work for us? Or help us?
Yeah, so I mean, it's increasingly coming up that Teams is the platform of communication alongside emails. So that's why we've adapted to that really, and we constantly strive to update the system. And recently we've come out with the Teams filer that really simply you can choose to file your Teams message. So let's say you receive a direction from a client or a consultant you're working with over Teams. You can press a button and say, I want to file this conversation to the project folder. And what that will do is it will file away the last 10 messages and the next 10 messages. So you've got a really good clear of capturing of the communication, what's been said and why it's been said. So if you did need to look back on it, you can do that really easily.
Someone else says, if Ideagen Mail Manager is a standalone system, how easy is it to import all of my existing email files? Would it be of benefit to a sole practitioner?
Yeah, so it's less of a standalone system, more of an Outlook add-in, which makes it really handy and easy to set up. So it's nice and easy to implement. For sole practitioners, I guess part of the main benefit of Mail Manager is saving you time. So, and obviously, if you're working for yourself, that's really crucial. Far too often we see people waste times. But likewise, the search tool means that the main benefit of search really is if you're sharing on projects. So if you're working with a number of team members, you have to access their project information. There's lots of different scenarios we work for. So, but I'm happy to catch up with them and discuss it.
Yeah. Okay. Someone else says, let's see. The email retrieval only works for the staff in the organization. How can ex-staff still have access to the organization email to obtain information with good intention? Yes. I don't think any ex-staff would ever have access to their
Yeah,
former email.
I mean, you can provide them access, maybe it's on SharePoint, but at the end of the day, we're not they're still able to access their emails in their Outlook. So if they wanted to batch file those across, they still be able to access it. But yeah, it's a strange one, that one.
A question for Lucas. My experience of FM, a lot of the assets they want to know about are within modeled assets, e.g. pumps within a chiller, breakers within a panel, and they're not modeled as an entity. How did you manage non-modeled assets?
It's a great point. So within the asset information model, there's an asset register as well. Not everything in the asset register has a geometry equivalent, and that's okay. I don't expect people to model small things on, control panels and stuff if that's not been put in the requirements when I come on board. So, but I do understand the problem in that there are systems within systems, and that's something that we still just need to get a bit more engagement with our FM teams, if we can, to influence the modeling requirements if they've got to be separate. So that's still a challenge, but there are ways to overcome it, in that often you might not need geometry, or your BIM consultant that you've got on board, or information management consultant, could retrospectively model you some things just for operation. If they're useful for operation and they're not useful for construction, don't model them in construction, because you're going to have to maintain it all the way. Just model them at the end.
Yeah, okay. Okay, I think we are just about there looking at the time. Perhaps just one final one for George. Someone asks, where does Mail Manager store our data?
Yeah, so that's all on their own platform. So whatever you guys are using to store project documents, like it might be SharePoint or Procore or anything like that, that's where we're going to store the information. It could be a file server. It's completely up to whoever's using it, really. But there's lots of different platforms we can store it on. But long story short, we don't host it. It's on their platform.
Exactly. And one final one for you, bit of an open goal, a bit of a sitter. This one, our Ideagen running free trials for Mail Manager.
Correct. Yeah, nice and to finish off on there. So yeah, we've got free trial of the system. More than happy to go onto our website. I'm sure we'll get that sent across to you after this. You can download the free trial there, and it gives you guys a really good example of how it works and how easy it is to implement as well. But likewise, we can do demonstrations, sort of a more in-depth show of the system, show a couple bit more functionality. But yeah, look forward to hopefully speaking to a couple of you soon after this.
Excellent. Okay, I'm conscious of the time, so we're going to wrap up here and now. So I'll just move to our final screen. As mentioned earlier, this webinar has been recorded, so you can watch it again or share the video with peers and colleagues via the original registration link from probably about close of play today, maybe slightly earlier. For more on Glider, go to glidertech.com. For more on Ideagen Mail Manager, go to mailmanager.com. Our next webinar will be on the 8th of February, and we'll start promoting that one tomorrow or Monday. Thank you to Lucas and to George for their time and their insight this morning. We really appreciate it. And thank you, the audience, for tuning in. Good afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Cheers.
Bye, everyone.